New at 5, the Festival of Lights volunteers have been busy setting up for their opening despite a few challenges they faced along the way. WGEM's Rose Lehner joins us now to explain how organizers have adapted. Rose?
Daniel, this year has been tough on Festival of Lights staff since they've had several thefts over the last few months. The Festival of Lights begins the 5th year with the Park District. They plan to open in 2 weeks, even with a few setbacks. Staff say they're grateful to receive a lot of support and donations from the community to ensure the holiday tradition continues. Staff say they've never experienced this many thefts before. They're especially thankful for one company to help them through their adversity.
There was a significant amount of thefts, which is something that we really haven't seen, certainly not to that degree ever before. And I think that hopefully we're getting that better under control. We've had some very kind people come forward and help us overcome those challenges. J.M. Huber came forward with replacing the wire that was stolen.
Staff say J.M. Huber replaced 13,000 square feet of wire that would have cost thousands of dollars to replace. The Festival of Lights is planning to open from 5 to 9 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day. Daniel?